So the useless housekeeper has finally decided to leave? You were just here to take care of Liam until he got into college. It'll be nice to have more space once this parasite is gone. As I was about to leave the house, my patience finally exhausted, my in-laws hurled these cruel words at me. They had been spreading lies about our son's wife having an affair, and even the relatives had believed their words. Their outrageous accusations made me feel like I was about to explode with all the feelings I'd been suppressing. What had I done to deserve this? I had endured it because they were my husband's family, but I couldn't take this treatment anymore. As I hastily packed my belongings without saying a word in response, I could hear their voices behind me, urging me to leave quickly. I felt tears welling up, but I refused to cry in front of these people. Inside, dark thoughts of revenge were swirling. After rushing out of the house, I took my phone from my bag, called a certain place, and gave instructions without hesitation. What? Are you sure? You just had that house built. I thought this would be the best way to deal the most damage to those people. This would surely make those in-laws panic. My name is Amanda. I lost my father to an accident when I was young and was raised by my mother alone. My mother managed to send me to high school, but we couldn't afford college, so I gave up on higher education and started working as a clerk at a law firm run by a relative. There was a lot to learn, but the workplace had good relationships and was very comfortable to work in. I'm grateful to my relatives who hired me despite only having a high school diploma. When I was 30, I met Edward through a friend's introduction and got married. Edward was a widower. His son Liam was a high school senior preparing for college entrance exams, and perhaps because of the stress, he was always on edge and barely spoke to me. Edward also had elderly parents, and at Edward's request, we decided to live together in a two-family house. As someone who had only lived with my mother, I was happy to have more family members, but life afterward didn't go smoothly at all. After starting to live with my in-laws, I became responsible for all the housework. I hoped that my in-laws, who were at home, would help a little, but they insisted that housework was the wife's job and wouldn't budge. With no choice, I kept up with cooking, laundry, and cleaning every day despite my busy work schedule. You should quit your job and be a housewife. That's what makes a woman happy. That's right, as a wife, it's natural to devote yourself to your husband and his parents. It's presumptuous to work outside the home. My in-laws, apparently unhappy with me continuing to work, complained every day. Once when I asked Edward to pick up something we'd forgotten on his way home from work, my in-laws scolded me, saying, "How dare you burden our son with errands?" To them, their son came first, and they seemed to think of his wife as their housekeeper. That's probably why they were unhappy about me working and not being at home. But even if they called me presumptuous, work was my purpose in life. When I said I couldn't quit, my in-laws laughed mockingly. A mere high school graduate clerk acting so high and mighty. Edward is an elite high-income earner, shouldn't you be a housewife supporting your husband? Or is there some reason you want to work outside? Suspicious indeed. Though their words were cruel, I had no intention of quitting my job no matter how much my in-laws criticized me. Hey, Liam, what's the meaning of this? I confronted Liam with certain documents. It was the bill for his phone usage, which had become surprisingly high last month. Looking at the details, it seemed he had been making in-app purchases in mobile games. What's the big deal? I couldn't get the items I wanted. This much should be fine. I had been worried that he was getting too absorbed in mobile games, and my concerns proved justified. My watching over him, thinking it might be a good stress relief from exam studies, had backfired. Far from apologizing to my questioning, Liam became defensive and insisted he had done nothing wrong. You say this much, but do you understand how much work it takes to earn this amount of money? This is way beyond pocket money. You need to reflect on this. Unable to overlook such a high charge, I scolded Liam severely. While Liam didn't talk back anymore, he glared at me before silently retreating to his room. He's not reflecting at all, I muttered to myself with a sigh. I wanted him to understand that as a high school student, he shouldn't carelessly spend his parents' money on in-app purchases, but Liam took a defiant attitude. And this incident spread to an unexpected place. Liam went crying to my in-laws about how I had scolded him. Hey, Amanda. Is it true you severely scolded Liam? That's because Liam spent too much money on mobile games. Don't you dare lecture my grandson, you outsider. Can't you let him have some stress relief? Someone with your poor education wouldn't understand, but that child is working hard on his entrance exams. Keep quiet. Apparently, they were very upset that I had scolded Liam. My in-laws berated me, telling me not to meddle. No matter how much I tried to argue, the two of them just shouted emotionally, making any discussion impossible. Liam, who was watching from the hallway, laughed at seeing me being told off. I'm sorry. I'll be more careful from now on. Good that you understand. Don't get carried away, you're just a wife. While I apologized to my in-laws on the surface, unable to argue anymore, inside I was filled with unresolved feelings. Later, when I passed Liam in the hallway, he said something unbelievable. Don't meddle with your poor education. I don't think of you as my mother at all. I really don't know why Dad married a woman like you. Liam spat out these words spitefully and left. There was no one in this house who recognized me as a family member. Why did everyone treat me so coldly? It was probably because I was raised by a single parent and only had a high school education. No matter how hard I worked at my job and housework, to them it was just expected, and they didn't think they needed to show any gratitude. No matter how tired I looked, they wouldn't stop treating me like a housekeeper. They probably just thought of me as a convenient tool. When I consulted with my husband Edward, he dismissed it saying everyone meant no harm. But I was neither a tool nor a housekeeper. I had hoped they would understand someday, but that hope was cruelly shattered. As this unsettling life continued, an incident occurred. One day, we received word that Edward had been in an accident at work and would need to be hospitalized for a week. Thank goodness. I was worried, but he'll get workers' compensation, right? He's an elite employee, so he'll be fine. We can rest easy even with him in the hospital. While worried about their son's accident, my stingy in-laws were clearly anxious about the income being cut off. But they seemed to relax after thinking about the workers' compensation. Then they started severely restricting my use of electricity and gas, saying no wasteful spending. If they judged something even slightly wasteful, they would cut off the electricity and gas without discussion, even while I was using them. The shower was the worst. Wasting again. How long are you going to use that water? What a waste. Don't be extravagant, you parasite. When I tried to take a shower after coming home tired from work, they strictly limited my time to 5 minutes, and if I went even slightly over, they would bang on the bathroom door and yell at me to get out immediately. There was no way to relieve my daily fatigue, and I was fed up with living under what felt like constant surveillance. Beyond that, anything I used was called wasteful, and my meals, daily necessities, and even cosmetics were monitored by my in-laws. My in-laws' self-centered and insensitive behavior continued. When I was away at work, they would enter my room without permission under the pretext of checking for wasteful spending. While rummaging around, they found my old planner. Then they confronted me with it when I returned home. "What's this? Why are you going through my planner without permission? Give it back. Your panic is suspicious." What a woman. My father-in-law twisted his face and spat out those words. "Who's this Blake written here? You're not having an affair, are you?" The schedule book indeed had "Dinner with Blake" written in it. But that was the name of the director at the law firm where I worked. There was nothing improper about it. But even when I denied it, saying Blake wasn't that kind of relationship, my in-laws were determined it was an affair and wouldn't listen. My in-laws took this as a perfect opportunity to blame me and would call me an adulteress almost daily. Liam also believed their words and joined in, calling me a filthy slut with cruel words. During my husband's hospitalization, my position in the family got worse and worse. I knew that even if Edward returned home from the hospital, things wouldn't improve. What my in-laws and Liam didn't know was that there was an absurd reason for Edward's current hospitalization. A few days later, Liam's efforts paid off, and he apparently got accepted to his first-choice university. But I found out about this much later, and even then, through an unbelievable timing. My in-laws intentionally didn't tell me about it, and of course, this was to harass me. "What are you dawdling for? I told you today is Liam's celebration party." When I returned from work, there were many relatives gathered there. What's this about? Everyone's waiting. Hurry up and prepare the meal." My mother-in-law demanded I cook for a large group of people, completely blindsiding me who had just returned home. That's when I finally learned about Liam's acceptance celebration, and I had to start cooking immediately without even a moment to catch my breath. "See, I told you she's a useless wife. If we had known she was this kind of woman, we would never have allowed our son to marry her." She strictly scolds Liam just because he's a stepchild. She's a terrible woman. She should get divorced soon. While I desperately prepared the food, my in-laws earnestly told the relatives how incompetent a wife I was. They probably didn't tell me about Liam's acceptance celebration just to humiliate me in front of the relatives. Their childish behavior was so ridiculous it went beyond anger to amazement. Plus, it seems the wife is having an affair. Our son is being deceived. She desperately denies it, but one day we'll catch her and throw her out of this house. Because my in-laws spread lies about me having an affair, even the relatives believed their words. Their outrageous accusations made me feel like I was about to explode with all the feelings I'd been suppressing. What had I done to deserve this? I had endured it because they were my husband's family, but I couldn't take this treatment anymore. I understand your point. Since you clearly don't want such an incompetent wife, I'll prepare to leave soon. After the celebration party ended and all the relatives had left, I said this to my in-laws. "Oh, you've finally come to your senses?" My mother-in-law, who apparently really disliked me, smiled with pleasure. "So the useless housekeeper has finally decided to leave. Now that Liam has been accepted to university, we don't need you anymore. Thanks for your work until now. You were just here to take care of Liam until he got into college. It'll be nice to have more space once this parasite is gone. Did you really think someone with just a high school education could become part of our family?" The two of them burst out laughing. Their expressions were ugly and made me realize they would never change their ways. "That's enough. Thank you for everything until now." I didn't talk back and quickly packed my belongings. Behind me, I could hear their voices urging me to leave quickly. I felt tears welling up, but I was determined not to cry in front of these people. So I left with just the bare minimum of belongings. I thought I'd stay at a hotel for now and caught a taxi to tell them the destination. Inside, dark thoughts of revenge were swirling. In the car, I took out my phone from my bag and called a certain place. It was a real estate company, and I gave instructions without hesitation. I'm selling all of that land and building. What? Are you sure? You just had it built for 2 families to live together. Indeed, as they said, that house had been built recently. While it might seem crazy, I couldn't stay quiet after such treatment. I thought this would be the best way to deal the most damage to those people. This would surely make those in-laws panic. The next day, I immediately received a call from my in-laws. What is the meaning of this? Explain yourself right now. The two were furious on the phone. Probably first thing in the morning, a representative from the real estate company must have visited their home. And they must have learned that the house and building were being sold. How can you sell this house on your own? Did you steal the deed? We'll report you to the police right now. Be prepared. My in-laws cursed me as a thief. But they didn't know that I was the registered owner of that land and building. I didn't steal anything, the land and building are registered in my name. I paid all the construction costs too, you know? When I revealed this fact, my in-laws laughed. Don't lie to get out of this. Someone with just a high school education like you couldn't possibly have that kind of money. You liar. If you don't believe me, why don't you ask the real estate agent there? Yes, this is indeed registered under Amanda Sama's name. When told this decisively, my in-laws became half crazed, unable to process it. Lies. You must be in on this too. You won't get away with trying to commit fraud. Our son is an elite employee, right? He must have built this house in his name, so how? Actually, while Edward appeared to leave for work every morning in a suit as an elite company employee, he had been fired a year ago for causing trouble at work. The trouble was a women's issue. Edward had been having affairs with multiple young women at the company. When HR found out about this, the company, which was strict about compliance, fired him for disciplinary reasons. Since then, Edward had been earning a small income from part-time work, but I was earning more than 90% of our living expenses. Neither my in-laws nor Liam knew that Edward had been fired. They had constantly insulted me, but in reality, their son Edward was the useless parasite. While I was angry at Edward for cheating and becoming unemployed, when he got down on his knees and begged for forgiveness, I gave him one last chance. That's why I had kept quiet about Edward leaving his company, but this had only reinforced my in-laws' view of me as the brain-dead wife who married their elite son. For someone with just a high school education. You're a liar. My in-laws stubbornly refused to believe my words. Seeing no progress, I let out a sigh. There was no point in continuing this argument. I'll mail you the documents later. You can judge whether it's true when you see them. Documents? What documents? Even you should understand what they mean when you see them. Excuse me. Saying this, I hung up unilaterally. Later, I sent an eviction notice along with my business card. It showed the name of the law firm where I worked, and the title before my name. That title was Attorney at Law. While I couldn't go to university due to family circumstances, I had passed the preliminary examination for the bar exam while working at the law firm and passed the difficult bar exam on my first try. In other words, I was a genuine lawyer. My in-laws called again after seeing my business card. Well, do you believe me now? Anyone can forge a business card? You adulteress must be trying to trick us. We'll know the truth if we ask Edward directly. Until then, we won't believe it. My in-laws said they were heading to Edward's hospital and told me to come too. Thinking this would be the final confrontation, I agreed. My in-laws were standing in front of the hospital with their arms crossed, looking indignant. Now your lies will be exposed. They still wouldn't believe what I said. I ignored my in-laws and headed to my husband's room. My in-laws hurriedly followed behind me. Edward? I'm coming in? I knocked on the hospital room door and entered. There, an amazing sight unfolded. Edward was embracing a young woman and kissing her. My in-laws who entered the room after me witnessed this scene perfectly. Oh. Why is everyone here? Surprised by the sudden family visit, Edward pushed the woman away. The woman, angry at being suddenly pushed away, left the hospital room with a sullen face. You suspected me of having an affair, didn't you? What about your own son? When I said this, my in-laws turned pale. Actually, I had noticed Edward's infidelity early on and had hired a private investigator to look into his behavior. I took out the investigator's report from my bag and presented it to my in-laws. Edward's injury that would take a week to heal, he had explained it as an accident at work, but in reality, he had broken his leg by stepping into a drain while trying to avoid dog droppings during a date with his mistress. Now do you feel more inclined to believe my words? Your precious son is not only unemployed but also cheats on his wife and breaks his leg in such a foolish way. You must have cheated first. With that man Blake mentioned in your planner. My father-in-law, setting aside Edward's situation, stubbornly brought up my suspected affair. We could report Blake to the Bar Association. For a lawyer to get involved with a married woman, he should face appropriate disciplinary action. My in-laws wore triumphant expressions. In their minds, my affair was apparently a settled fact. You really are foolish people. Blake is my affair partner? This is so ridiculous it makes me want to cry. You can't get out of this. You don't have any proof that they're not your affair partner. Oh, but I do have proof, look here. I operated my smartphone and showed my in-laws a certain web page. It was from my law firm's website, and the director's introduction page showed Blake's own photo. This can't be. This time they had no choice but to fall silent. Because there was a dignified, smiling woman in her 50s looking at the camera. My in-laws had assumed Blake was a man because of the name. But Blake was a woman. Blake was my paternal aunt and also my benefactor who had arranged for me to work at the law firm. So, who was having an affair with whom? That was just a misunderstanding. We had no idea it was a woman. It's the misleading name that's at fault. When I confronted them with a stern tone while glaring at them, they became flustered. Now you'll face the consequences for all the ways you've mocked me. Saying this, I revealed that I had evidence of all the harassment they had done to me. I had recorded them entering my room without permission and taking my belongings on security cameras, and had also recorded their daily harassment. I have all the evidence perfectly lined up. I'm considering legal action. If you claim you didn't do these things, we can discuss it in court. Wait a minute. There seems to be some misunderstanding between us, let's talk more. We never meant to harass you. It was just a slight misalignment of feelings. That's right, Why would we do terrible things to our son's wife? It's a misunderstanding, just a misunderstanding. My misunderstanding? Their excuses brought my anger, which I had been trying to keep under control, to its peak. From when I married until now, you've put me through terrible things. How dare you say it's a misunderstanding after calling me an uneducated parasite? My in-laws were cowering at my intense demeanor. They finally seemed to understand who was in charge. And you. You knew your parents were mistreating your wife and pretended not to notice. On top of that, you had affairs with various women. What a worthless man. Edward flinched when my anger suddenly turned toward him. I know I was wrong. I'll turn over a new leaf and try hard from now on. Please. Edward bowed his head pitifully to me, but this didn't move my emotions at all. If anything, I felt anger and disgust rising at Edward for still making excuses even in this situation. I'm tired of hearing those lines. You said the same thing when you were fired for disciplinary reasons, didn't you? And what happened? Until just now you had a woman in your hospital room, nothing has changed. Edward couldn't argue back and hung his head. Maybe if he had been more responsible, we could have had a different future, but there's no point saying that now. I'm divorcing you. From now on, work honestly to make a living. And keep your womanizing in check or you'll really ruin yourself. Though that's no longer my concern. Amanda, we were family, weren't we? Won't you reconsider without saying such scary things? That's right, we thought of you as our real daughter. Let's clear up our misunderstandings and get along from now on. My in-laws' self-serving words made me laugh involuntarily. Had they forgotten how they had constantly looked down on and mocked people? Seeing their position becoming disadvantageous, they threw away their pride and started sucking up to me. I thought they were disgraceful people to the end. Oh, don't force yourselves. I'm just an outsider to you after all. From now on, help each other with just your real family. Though you'll struggle quite a bit now that you've lost the house. After saying this, I left the hospital room. Afterward, my in-laws refused to leave the house that had been put up for sale until the end, but the real estate company, losing patience, called the police and had them forcibly evicted. Although Liam had been accepted to university, my in-laws and Edward couldn't afford the tuition. Liam came to my workplace, apologized for his past rudeness, and begged me to pay for his tuition, but I refused, saying I was now just a stranger. After that, his university enrollment apparently couldn't happen, and he decided to get a job after high school. He probably never imagined that he would end up in the same position as me, whom he had looked down on for having only a high school education. But it's a good opportunity to correct his personality of looking down on others. Unlike my in-laws and Edward, he still has room for reform. If possible, I hope he learns about society's harshness and becomes someone who can understand others' pain. Afterward, I took civil action over the in-laws' harassment and my husband's infidelity in succession and managed to receive a small amount of compensation from Edward and my in-laws. After that, Edward and his family apparently moved into a small public housing unit. Not only Edward but also his elderly parents had to go to work, and Liam got a job at a small factory. My in-laws apparently tell people around them that the fish they let get away was big. Hearing this, I'm really glad I didn't reveal that I was a lawyer earlier. If they had known that I earned more than Edward, things would have become even more troublesome. I had no desire to become my in-laws' cash cow. After my divorce from Edward was finalized, I moved to a new apartment using the money from selling the house and land. The new home is plenty spacious for living alone, and it's become my favorite space, furnished with interior decorating to my taste. While living with Edward's family, I felt suffocated by the oppressive atmosphere, but now that everything is over, I'm experiencing a sense of liberation. Though I was constantly mocked and looked down upon by them, now I can work with confidence. From now on, as a lawyer, I hope I can help weak people who are oppressed like I once was. The days of being oppressed by my in-laws and betrayed by my husband were painful, but it's because I dared to fight back that I have my happy daily life now.